Yes, Max.
ओम परतत्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्ण समाज्ञया यो धर्म स्थापन रतो वीरेशं तं नमाम्यहम्. Where on the last Monday we finished reading the first chapter of Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga, and today we are entering the second chapter. The first chapter heading was Karma in its effect on character, and by that we understood that we are not thinking of the outside results, but the sanskara which it produces on our mind, which makes up our character, that we are interested in, and knowledge is the goal of life. How to get that knowledge? It is inside. This much we have learned. Now, in the second chapter, heading we will see, each is great in his own place. So, what is the implication from the chapter heading, and why this topic has come? The whole Karma Yoga is based upon Bhagavad Gita, I told you repeatedly. Now, we will find that the change we have to do, Swamiji has discussed motives in details in the first chapter. So what we have to change is the attitude behind our work, not the work. Each person has his own work. One person, there may be something good for him, not for me. This is something very, very important in life. For example, Arjuna said, instead of this war, I will go and beg food. Now begging food is in those days, it was Brahmin's religion. These days we see it is sannyasi's religion. So, not for you. You are a Kshatriya. So, this is the point Swamiji is dealing here. Now, in this respect, we shall see that two things are there which determine our duty. Two things. What is righteous, what is the work we should do. One is the position in society. One is position in our life. Position in society, this differentiation of Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra is throughout the world. It is recognized in India. Not that it is in India only. I think in some context I had quoted a beautiful poem, Horatius, you remember? That is, in the Roman time, there were city-states, and city itself was a state, and there was no king, there used to be council. And the city generally, to save from outside attacks, they had dug a canal around the city and filled it with water. And there was a narrow bridge on that. So, they became sluggish that nobody will attack us. But the spies are everywhere. So the news reached some other city that these people are careless now. So they sent a military to capture the city. And the news came that the enemy military is at the end of that bridge. Now the council sat and what to do. So the only thing they could do was to break that bridge, a narrow bridge on which more than 2-3 people cannot walk together. So to break down that bridge. But the party has arrived on the other end. So till the bridge is broken, how to protect? From here I quote the poem. Then outspake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate, for every man upon this earth, death cometh soon or late. Then how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? Can you understand? This is a Kshatriya. Everybody did not say like that. One man said like that. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and temples of his gods? This is a typical Kshatriya. When Horatius became ready, two more people became ready. So these three people went across the bridge, stood at the other end, and on this side they started breaking the bridge. And because the bridge was narrow, these three people could resist the big military. Now when the bridge was about to be broken, then they shouted from this end, "Come back, come back, come back." Those two friends of his came back. Horatius did not turn back. When he saw the bridge is broken and fallen down, then he jumped into the canal. And by God's grace, you may say, he swam and came back. In his lifetime, they erected a statue there. Now for such a man, if you say go and negotiate, so many discussions are there. Some engineer said we should raise a boundary wall, and somebody. So, this is what is called a Kshatriya. Now, it is his duty. It is the best thing for him to do. And through this, he will realize God. That is the main important point. Svesve karmani abhirata sansiddhim labate nara. Swadharme nidanam shreya paradharma bhayava. So the Gita repeatedly tells us that doing the work which is best for you, you have to struggle. The attitude should change. I will tell another incident now. In Belur Math, in those days, a paid sweeper was there who used to clean the toilets everywhere. And one brahmachari was speaking little harshly to that sweeper. Mahapurush Maharaj was the president. He heard that. He called the brahmachari and said, you should not talk like that to him. If you are doing God's work, he is also doing God's work. And remember, the work which you cannot do, he is doing. So he is equally important. Don't talk like that to him. So, Swamiji in this lesson will tell us that a sweeper's work and a king's work. The king cannot do sweeper's work. The sweeper cannot do king's work. So this is our position in society, roughly. In the modern age, we are not thinking of the caste or the varnas and all that. But this proves that my work is not your work. Another point. This is called Varna Dharma. Another point. And that point is that I am a student. So my work is to study. I am a householder. My work is to earn money. I have gone to the forest. My work is to meditate. I am a sannyasi. I am beyond all works. So the state of life and the state of my position in society will determine what I should do. So each is great in his own place means we need not go and do others' work. We do our work. Why? Because what we have to change, our energy should be spent in changing the motive behind the work, in changing the attitude toward the work, not to change our work itself. Now, as I said, the old days are not there. Typical varnas are not there. Overlappings and mixtures are there. But even then, I find out what is my work and do accordingly. Another point here is, which Swamiji will bring in this essay, is a stage comes, the sannyasi, a stage comes when not doing work becomes my work. We have already seen that, the limitations of work and one who goes beyond. So these 2 points Swamiji is going to discuss in this lesson. One is work which is proper for you, you need not change, you have to change the attitude. Secondly, do your work in such a way that you raise yourself to the level when you go beyond work. These are the 2 points. And that is what is suggested by the title, each is great in his own place. Don't compare. Now, we come to the lesson itself, and Swamiji starts telling, according to the Sankhya philosophy. Why Swamiji is referring to Sankhya? On the first day we saw, we have seen 2-3 times, that this is a Vedanta Prakarana Grantha. Now, Sankhya specialize in describing the gunas. Same thing, running parallel to the Gita. In the 18th chapter, Bhagavan says, Prochate guna sankhyane yathavat shrunutanyaphi. He calls Sankhya as guna sankhyana shastra. Shastra which counts the gunas. And what is told there, that I am telling you, he says. So Swamiji's reference to Sankhya does not mean that he has shifted from Vedanta. But if somebody is expert in something, why not listen to him? So this is the portion of the Sankhya philosophy which is accepted by the Vedanta. So, now what does Sankhya tell us? Nature is composed of 3 forces. Nature is composed of 3 forces. They are not 3 gunas, means qualities. They are the constituents of nature, called in Sanskrit Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Each person, we have all the 3. Everybody has all the 3. But in some becomes preponderant, the others are less. So, accordingly our work is determined. In the Gita, Brahmana Kshatriya Vishayam Shudranam cha Parantapa Karmani Pravivактani Svabhava Prabhavair Gunai. The guna which makes our svabhav, the guna prominently which makes our svabhav, according to that the karmas are divided. So, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Now Swamiji is trying to explain it to the Western audience. These, as manifested in the physical world, are what we may call equilibrium, activity and inertness. Everybody has these 3, less or more. According to Gita, those who have preponderance of equilibrium, they alone are called the Brahmins. Those who have preponderance of activity, but equilibrium also is there, they are called the Kshatriyas. Those who have preponderance of activity, but inertia also is there, that is Vaishyas. And those are more inertia, but activity also is there, they are called Shudras. In one of the classes, perhaps in Atmabodh class, we discussed it at great length. Now, Tamas is typified as darkness or inactivity. Darkness means the shine of knowledge is not there, or inactivity. We can term it as inertia. Inertia means not readiness to change. Rajas is activity expressed as attraction or repulsion, ragadvesh, that is the Rajogun. If we want to praise Rajogun, we will say that man is very dynamic. And if you want to condemn Rajogun, we will say that man is very restless. So activity as attraction or repulsion, and Sattva is the equilibrium of the two. In every man there are these three forces. Sometimes tamas prevails. All this we will find in the Gita 14th chapter. We become lazy, we cannot move, we are inactive, bound down by certain ideas or by mere dullness. At other times activity prevails, and at still other times that calm balancing of both. In the daytime, if you see, in the night, tamogun. When the sun shines, in India at least, and the blood becomes warm, activity comes. And when the day is merging into night, or the night is merging into day, that sandikshan, sattvagun prevails. And so, that is what is our life. One guna suppresses the other two and shows itself. That is what is told in the 14th chapter. Again, so in every person these three, by rotation they come. Second point, that some people predominant in this, some in that, as we said earlier. Again, in different men, one of these forces is generally predominant, generally. Because, say a typical Brahmin, he also sleeps. So at that time Sattvagun is not working, Tamogun is working. He also does activity, but predominant is balance. The characteristic of one man is inactivity, dullness and laziness. That is a characteristic of the man. Swamiji has given some example also later on. That of another, activity, power, manifestation of energy, and in still another, we find the sweetness, calmness, and gentleness which are due to the balancing of both action and inaction. So in all creatures, all creation, in animals, planets and men, we find a mere more or less typical manifestation of all these different forces. In the Gita, it is told in the 18th chapter that even in heaven, among the gods, there are these three gunas. In man, in nature, animals, everywhere, these three gunas are there. Karma Yoga has specially to deal with them three factors. Karma Yoga has to deal with them. How? By teaching what they are. That means first you have to identify. You see, karma is not only action. From first day I am telling you. You have to learn. You have to learn how to understand the gunas, especially in these days, because these things have practically disappeared. So we have to understand, we have to analyze and find out what guna we have, what guna he, she or it has, what they are, and how to employ them. How to employ them. Tamoguna is there. We use it when the sleeping time comes. Activity, we use it to do our actions. Balance, we use it for meditation. So, how to employ them. Also, what preponderance we have and what work we like to do. This is also employing them. So, we have to understand the three gunas and how to employ them. This knowledge is part of Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga has specially to deal with these four factors by teaching what they are and how to employ them. It helps us to do our work better. If we know what is our guna, if we know how to employ it, we can do our work better. Now, next point. Human society is a graded organization. You understand? This is what I was telling, this Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Human society is a graded organization. If we take statistics, of course, different nations have different preponderances. That also is there. But on a whole, if you see the world, 50% people will come under the category of Shudras. 50% people, names we change, we say Bahujan Samaj and Gandhiji told Harijans, and 50% proliterate, they are different names. So these people who have to be forced to work are majority. Those who work to produce wealth, they are roughly calculating, I am telling it is not a percentage wise, but almost half of the population of the whole world will belong to the lowest category. Then say 30% will be those who try to earn money. For society, all the four are necessary. Then maybe 15% who are the real Kshatriyas. And hardly 5% are those who could be called Brahmins. Human society is a graded organization. This is the gradation. Now, why we want to know this? We all know about morality and we all know about duty. All know means we have an idea of morality, idea of duty. But at the same time we find that in different countries the significance of morality varies greatly. This is another gradation. In England, that thing will not be called moral, which is called moral in India. In India, that thing will not be called moral, which is called moral in England. So, that is the important point. We must understand. When we ask, is it proper? We have to ask, is it proper for this man in this country? That is the propriety. All, not same properness for all. If we try to judge like that, we are killing the whole humanity. We want to find out what is proper for this man at this age living in this country. And we all know about duty. Two different ideas, morality, what is right or wrong, and what is my duty which I must do. But at the same time we find that in different countries the significance of morality varies greatly. And this Swamiji is telling in the West that you must not apply your criteria to people in India. You must not apply your criteria to people in China. What is regarded as moral in one country may in another be considered perfectly immoral. For instance, in one country, cousins may marry. In another, it is thought to be very immoral. You understand? Parsis, Mohammedans, they can marry their cousin. In India, Hindus, no. In one, men may marry their sisters-in-law. In another, it is regarded as immoral. Even in India, in different castes, the idea of morality changes. In one country, people may marry only once, in another many times, and so forth. Similarly, in all other departments of morality, we find the standard varies greatly, yet we have the idea that there must be a universal standard of morality. That is our idea, abstraction. But in practical life, morality has to vary, will vary. So it is with duty. The idea of duty varies much among different nations. In one country, if a man does not do certain things, people will say he has acted wrongly. While if he does those very things in another country, people will say that he did not act rightly. And yet we know that there must be some universal idea of duty. In the same way, one class of society, now I come to the classes of society. In one class of society thinks that certain things are among its duty, while another class thinks quite the opposite and would be horrified if it had to do those things. Two ways are left open to us. Up till now he said that we have concept of universal morality, we have concept of universal duty, but how to think about it is teaching us. Two ways are left open to us. The way of the ignorant, who think that there is only one way to truth. One way to truth, he is telling now. That is our sadhana to go God. There is only one way. And that all the rest are wrong. And the way of the wise, second way, who admit that according to our mental constitution or the different planes of existence in which we are, duty and morality may vary. Mental constitution. Same thing, Sattva, Raja, Tama, preponderance, we have to see that is called the mental constitution. The important thing is to know that there are gradations of duty and morality. Gradations. That the duty of one state of life in one set of circumstances will not and cannot be that of another. Two things, state of life and circumstances. Position in life and position in society. To illustrate, now he takes up an example of duty and going beyond duty, karma and going beyond karma. Normally associated with householders and sannyasis. Normally. I want to tell something here. We have general impression that Swamiji has found a new way of karma. And we are all doing karma. Almost all. Now, our sannyas is not the sannyas known in the Gita. When I do this karta gyan, I am the doer, this vanishes, that point is called sannyas. Our elders have told us, our sannyas is an organizational sannyas. It will help us to get the real sannyas. So the principles do not change. The application changes according to the times in which we are born. And that also Swamiji will explain here. So, to illustrate, all great teachers have taught, resist not evil. Resist not evil. Jesus has taught, Buddha has taught, for sannyasi, everybody has taught. Now I will give an example. First, Swamiji has written an example in his travel he found. In Ceylon, called Sri Lanka these days, Buddhism is prevalent. And they say, ahimsa paramo dharma. Non-injury is the supreme religion. No, there was a rich man in Swamiji's times, very rich man, Buddhist. And he lived in the upper floor of his house. And the ground floor, his riches were there. And there were guards. Now one robber, one thief, seeing that the owner is there, not there, he entered in the night. And the guards caught him. Swamiji has written this. The guards are asking the owner, what shall we do with this man? Shall we beat him? The owner said, no, you should not beat. Ahimsa paramo dharma. Then they said, should we hand him over to the police? He said, no. Police beat him very badly. Ahimsa paramo dharma. Then what should we do? He said, put him in a sack and throw him in the ocean. Ahimsa paramo dharma. So, everything becomes a caricature. Resist not evil. That non-resistance is the highest moral ideal. It may be the highest moral ideal, but to practice that we have to go to the highest state. Here generally Swamiji is making a distinction between Grihastha and Sannyasi. And there is another, in the Swamiji's sayings and utterances, there is an occasion. Somebody is asking, somebody is doing evil in our presence. Shall we resist or not? Swamiji says non-resistance. And after a pause says, for the sannyasi, for the householder, resist with all your might. So, what is right? There is no universal thing in right. What is right to make him rise to realize God? That is the full sentence. What is right for a person at a particular time so that he raises himself and ultimately realizes God? That is the question, not what is right universally. Swamiji is proving this now. We all know that if a certain number of us attempted to put that maxim fully into practice, certain number, not even all, the whole social fabric would fall to pieces. The wicked would take possession of our properties and our lives and would do whatever they like with us. This is what will happen. In this context, I remember one very great thing, and that is Sermon on the Mount. In the Bible, especially in the book of Matthew, that is the highest teaching of Jesus. But is it universal? That is the main question. What is the occasion? Seeing the multitude, he went up a hill and sat there. And his chosen disciples followed him, and then he opened his mouth. So he is not teaching the multitude, remember. Seeing the multitude, he went up a hill. And when his chosen disciples went there, he opened his mouth. And to them he is telling, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the earth. Is he telling this to general humanity? Then the whole world will be salt only. And there he says, I have come to fulfill, not to destroy. The old rule will not change till the earth passes away. But I am telling unto thee, you must remember this. The old rule said, tooth for a tooth and a nail for a nail. But I tell unto thee, love your enemy as you love your friend. Remember this? And who is thee? The sannyasis, his chosen disciples. If this is practice that Swamiji is telling, now terrorists are there in every country. And this year, in India, this year, CPRF, police are there, paramilitary and all that. Now if the terrorist comes before you, you will say, slap me, hit me on the other cheek also. Then Swamiji said the whole social fabric will fall. And Swamiji later on will tell you, that is what Arjuna was going to do. And Krishna said, you are a hypocrite. You are a coward, a hypocrite. So, duty of one person is not the duty of another, and duty here means that which raises you to the level that you realize God. What is good definition of moral, definition of duty? That which raises you till you realize God. Raises you, not the other. What the other is doing will not raise you. The wicked would take possession of our properties and our lives and would do whatever they like with us. Even if for only one day such non-resistance were practiced, it would lead to disaster. Yet intuitively, not by reason, in our heart of hearts we feel the truth of the teaching, resist not evil. That is the highest ideal, that we always feel. But if we are in that height, then that will be proper for us. This seems to us to be the highest ideal. Yet to teach this doctrine only would be equivalent to condemning a vast portion of mankind. That is another problem. If you teach this to all, then we will feel, oh, we are doing wrong all the time. If we resist the evil, it is wrong. We should practice non-resistance. So it will be like condemning a vast portion of mankind. That means the very, very few people are able to practice this non-resistance of evil. Not all, should not. Not only so, it would be making men feel that they were always doing wrong and cause in them scruples of conscience in all their actions. In all their actions, people earn money. Should we earn money or not? Are we doing wrong? Should we control people? Are we doing wrong? So these scruples or conscience will pervade the society. It would weaken them, and that constant self-disapproval would breed more vice than any other weakness would. To the man who has begun to hate himself, the gate to degeneration has already opened, and the same is true of a nation. What happens to a man, same is true of a nation. If the whole nation starts practicing certain things, it will go to hell. If the whole nation starts hating itself, it will go to hell. Our first duty is not to hate ourselves. Because to advance, we must have faith in ourselves first and then in God. This is a great thing. People do not understand it. God here means a personal God, extra cosmic God. Somewhere a God is there. But if God is true, He is all-pervading. He is my real nature. And if God is my real nature, then I should have faith in myself. Faith in myself is not ego, huh? No. Swamiji has told in another place, in Practical Vedanta, faith in yourself means faith in all, because the same self is in all. So faith in yourself, not in your body, not in your mind, not in your intelligence, not in your feelings. Faith in yourself. That means faith in God all-pervading. Faith in God as my inner controller. So, Swamiji is telling that faith in self is more important than faith in extra cosmic God as is generally believed. He who has no faith in himself can never have faith in God. You understand? In the real nature of God. Those who believe in God, somewhere sitting beyond some clouds and controlling the world, that is not real faith in God. Faith in God is the transcendent immanent reality, Sarvatita Sarvagata, that is God. And if that is Sarvatita Sarvagata, that is my real nature. And so, unless I believe in my own real nature, how can I believe in that reality? Therefore, the only alternative remaining to us is to recognize that duty and morality vary under different circumstances. Not that the man who resists evil is doing what is always and in itself wrong, but that in the different circumstances in which he is placed, it may become even his duty to resist evil. Example, in reading the Bhagavad Gita, many of you in Western countries means among the Christians, in those days at least, as I told you just now, Sermon on the Mount they take as universal teaching of Jesus, and hypocrisy comes. Sermon on the Mount is meant for select few. Sermon on the Mount, he says again and again, the old rules will not change. Tooth for a tooth and nail for nail will not change. But I say unto you, you remember in the Gita? Otherwise, that it is knowledge which will give you freedom, but O Arjuna, but for you, karmani eva adhikaraste. For you, work is the method, not jnana. By work you will raise yourself and reach jnana. So, in the Bible, the opposite side, for the select sannyasis, he is telling it is for you. But I say unto you. So, that is why that is taken in the Western countries as if it is the universal teaching. And so, in reading the Bhagavad Gita, many of you in Western countries may have felt astonished at the second chapter, wherein Shri Krishna calls Arjuna a hypocrite and a coward because of his refusal to fight or offer resistance on account of his adversaries being his friends and relatives. Adversaries are his friends and relatives, swajana. Because of that, I don't want to fight. And he thinks he is filled with great compassion. Shri Krishna tells, it is the cowardice, it is the smallness of the heart that is making you think like this. Hypocrite means you will not be able to practice that. You will show only that. And a coward, because of his refusal to fight or offer resistance on account of his adversaries being his friends and relatives. Why he was fighting? Because the adversaries were going to do wrong, because they were adharmic, they were spreading unrighteousness, and so they had to be controlled. So we had to fight for them. That is what Arjuna was meant. Making the plea that non-resistance was the highest ideal of love. And Arjuna started talking like that. I will not resist. Let them kill me. I love them. This love is attachment only. This is a great lesson for us all to learn, that in all matters the two extremes are alike. The extreme positive and the extreme negative are always similar. Example, when the vibrations of light are too slow, we do not see them, nor do we see them when they are too rapid. You know, ultraviolet, we see the violet color and we never see the ultraviolet rays. And infrared. So if the wavelength is less than that of the red light, we do not see. We see the red mixture, not the infrared. Similarly, ultraviolet we do not see. But they are different. That is the highest velocity, this is the lowest velocity. So with sound, you know that supersonic and all that. So with sound, when very low in pitch we do not hear it. When very high, we do not hear it either. Human hearing has a range. Below this you cannot hear, above this you cannot hear. Of like nature is the difference between resistance and non-resistance. One man does not resist because he is weak, lazy and cannot. Not because he will not, he cannot. The other man knows that he can strike an irresistible blow if he likes. Yet he not only does not strike, but blesses his enemies. Because he is in that state. He is blessing the enemies itself. There is a great story. Swamiji has talked about Pawari Baba. Now he used to live in a cave. And very little food people used to keep outside. He used to take it and go. In 15 days once he used to come out. So people thought that he lives on air. That is why the name Pawari Baba. Now because he is in a cave, some thief thought that he is hiding a lot of property. So a thief entered. Pawari Baba was in meditation, closed eyes. He saw there is nothing but some cooking utensils. So he gathered that and made a bundle and wanted to get away. At that time, Pawari Baba's eyes opened. Then seeing that eyes open, the thief dropped that bundle there and started running. Pawari Baba took that bundle and ran behind him. He thought he is coming to catch me red-handed. That is why the bundle is coming. Being a yogi, he caught him at point. And he said, my friend, why you have left that behind? It is yours, you take away. Resist not evil. Now, Swamiji was traveling in a train somewhere Gujarat, Rajasthan. And a sannyasi was sitting opposite to him. So Swamiji told him this story. That sannyasi asked, Maharaj, you have told me half the story. You did not tell what happened to that thief. Swamiji said, I do not know. He said, I am that thief sitting before you. That is the power of non-resistance. That is the power of Pawari Baba's non-resistance. He converted the thief. Bhagavan Buddha, he was entering a forest and Daku, robber, Angulimal lived there. Angulimal means he will chop off the fingers of people and make a garland out of it. People said, please do not go there. He said, what is there? He is a man, I am a man. When he entered, Angulimal was surprised. How have you entered there? You do not know this or that. He said, you are a man and I am a man. Angulimal became his disciple, remember. Can we do that? So, the other man knows that he can strike an irresistible blow if he likes. Yet he not only does not strike but blesses his enemies. The one who from weakness resists not commits a sin, and as such cannot receive any benefit from the non-resistance. While the other would commit a sin by offering resistance. That means he is coming down from his position. Buddha gave up his throne and renounced his position. That was true renunciation. But there cannot be any question of renunciation in the case of a beggar who has nothing to renounce. Then what they do? They become a sannyasi and get food, free food. So we must always be careful about what we really mean when we speak of this non-resistance and ideal love. We must first take care to understand whether we have the power of resistance or not. Then, having the power, if we renounce it and do not resist, we are doing a grand act of love. I will tell you one thing about the Sermon on the Mount. On the Christmas Eve, I talked like that in our Kankal ashram once upon a time, Haridwar ashram. And after the lecture, two ladies, mother and daughter, they said, Maharaj, you have opened our eyes like anything today. That this is not for all. We must resist evil. And that is not wrong. So, complete transformation of ideas took place. And that is what is Sermon on the Mount. We must first take care to understand whether we have the power of resistance or not. Then, having the power, if we renounce it and do not resist, we are doing a grand act of love. But if we cannot resist, and yet at the same time try to deceive ourselves into the belief, that we are actuated by motives of the highest love, we are doing the exact opposite. Arjuna became a coward at the sight of the mighty array against him. His love in quotation mark, that means as if love, the attachment, made him forget his duty toward the country and the king. That is why Sri Krishna told him that he was a hypocrite. Thou talkest like a wise man, but thy actions betray thee to be a coward. Therefore stand up and fight. अशोचानन व शोचस्तम प्रज्ञावादांश भाषसे गता सुंश्च नानुशोचन्ति पंडिता. Such is the central idea of Karma Yoga. The Karma Yogi is the man who understands that the highest ideal is non-resistance, and who also knows that this non-resistance is the highest manifestation of power in actual possession. And also what is called the resisting of evil is but a step on the way towards the manifestation of this highest power. 6th chapter of the Gita. Arurukshor muner yogam karma karanam uchyate yogar udasya tassaiva shama karanam uchyate. So long as he is struggling, karma is his main work. But after he has controlled himself, gone beyond work, then gathering himself in, meditating becomes the main point. Namely, non-resistance. Before reaching this highest ideal, man's duty is to resist evil. Let him work. Every work means resisting evil, that is what Swamiji said. Let him fight, let him strike straight from the shoulder. Then only when he has gained the power to resist will non-resistance be a virtue. Example. I once met a man in my country whom I had known before as a very stupid, dull person, who knew nothing and had not the desire to know anything and was living the life of a brute. He asked me what he should do to know God, how he was to get free, God and moksha. Can you tell a lie? I asked him. No, he replied. Then you must learn to do so. It is better to tell a lie than to be a brute or a log of wood. You are inactive. You have not certainly reached the highest state, which is beyond all actions, calm and serene. You are too dull even to do something wicked. Now Swamiji is telling in joke, that was an extreme case, of course, and I was joking with him. But what I meant was that a man must be active in order to pass through activity to perfect calmness. Inactivity should be avoided by all means. Mahate sangostu akarmani. Let your attachment to not be towards not doing things. Activity always means resistance. Resist all evils, mental and physical. And when you have succeeded in resisting, then will calmness come. It is very easy to say, hate nobody, resist not evil. But we know that what that kind of thing generally means in practice. When the eyes of society are turned towards us, We may make a show of non-resistance, but in our hearts it is canker all the time. So, we shall continue this on the next Monday. This is a beautiful lesson to learn, and the name Swamiji is given is each is great in his own place. That is comparing between the householder and a sannyasi. Householder should be like this, sannyasi should be like this. In the clear-cut case, Swamiji is telling us what is the duty of one is not the duty of other. Here duty and morality have only one meaning. What will raise you to go to God? That is your duty, that is your morality. So it is not my duty and your duty is different. That is why this is a great lesson, and we shall continue it on the next Monday. Om Paratatve Sada Lino Ramakrishna Samagya Yo Dharma Sthapana Rato Viresham Tam Namamyaham. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yes. Anything Maharaj special?